capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know,
It's
Zach.
a tough one, I
It's
know.
really hard.
And maybe
Yes.
comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. So tonight we're going to be continuing on in our short essay, leftist, I don't even know what you call it, series, I guess, is the best word for it, of content. We are on part 2 of Umberto Eco's Fascism. And he's just getting into the part where he's kind of listing some of the warning signs, the red flags to look out for when fascism is on the rise. Seems kind of appropriate in this day and age, unfortunately. But here we are. Neoliberalism is running out of excuses and answers and ways to make people continue to believe in it as a viable path forward. And so there has to be an alternative. And the idea is you have to go either right or left. So right word is towards fascism. It's a clamping down on human rights. It is it's kind of like I mean, there's definitely making it way oversimplified, but it's not so dissimilar to the analogy where if you have a pizza party at your work at for your birthday or whatever, and a bunch of people are invited, and oh look, Zen is here. Hopefully she can connect. Oh, anyway, so if you have a box of pizza out, there's most people are going to take one slice at least to start with, and then maybe later on take another one. But there are some people who look at that and they say, oh, there's not going to be enough for everybody. I better take as much as I possibly can for myself, otherwise I might not even get one. And so those are kind of the two strategies. One person is concerned about others to make sure that they get enough. Spread things around as much as possible. That would be the leftward path. And the other is so afraid of not getting enough themselves that they hoard and try and get everything for themselves at the exclusion of everyone else. And that is exactly the fascist path. So if you're that person at the pizza party, you might want to rethink your ethics, bud, because you're trending towards the right side and not the correct side. The right side is in the conservative side, the fascist side. Because that's what fascism is. It is hoarding all the rights for yourself at the expense of others, hoarding all the power that you can at the expense of others, hoarding all the resources and levers of control for yourself at the expense of others, because it is seen that there is not enough to go around. That's usually what kicks people into either fascism or communism or socialism, I guess more broadly. So, I mean, there's plenty of examples of societies going the other direction, too. Even momentarily. Think about in, say, a natural disaster where pretty much everyone's knocked on their ass, literally and metaphorically, and there may not be enough to go around. A lot of times you'll see people getting together, helping one another out, helping, not questioning, hey, can you means test your need for this food before I give it to you, which is you hungry, you need food, here's some food, I have extra food. You need water, I have water. You need to get around, I happen to have a boat. We can go save other people without checking IDs or citizenship or anything. beforehand. Just helping one another out because the need is obvious. So humanity's not all one thing, and I would like to believe that we can at least get going in that help one another out direction when times get tough, because they're guaranteed to continue getting more tough. Neoliberals are getting to the point where they're buying up, necessities. They're price gouging food. They're price gouging gasoline. That's which is transportation. Uh, they're making it so it's more difficult for the least well off of us to continue even making it to the point where, a lot of people are threatened with homelessness or utter bankruptcy or any number of really bad things. They're buying up housing, and it's incredibly overheating the housing market to the point where most of my generation, and especially the one coming after it, Gen Z, are unable to buy homes when our parents were able to buy homes long before this. I think my parents got their first home when I was 4, so they must have been like about 30, mid 30s when they got their first home, and they had help from their parents. And my wife and I, if we end up getting a home, will likely need help from my parents, because that's just the way of it. It's incredibly difficult to raise 10% when you're at the same time paying someone else's mortgage in the form of rent. Hey, look who it is. It's Dan Platt. How you doing?
I'm all right. I was just bored enough to. Oh, okay, you're doing Or Fascism Part 2.
Yeah, part 2.
All right. I
So we're just
figure I'd join you for whatever.
I appreciate that. Good to see you. Sorry I couldn't make it this Sunday. Things just got really squished together with my schedule and too much stuff I had to do.
Yeah. Well, it was just too goddamn hot,
Yeah.
I just had to almost shave my head.
Well, you're looking sharp though. It's a nice summer do you got
I
going.
don't I don't have it this short very often. But last
Mm-hmm.
last last summer was actually pretty mild, and I'm definitely more of a winter person.
Yeah.
I do so little during the summer.
Yeah.
Don't ask me to do much. But in the winter and the fall, that's when I'm hopping. So,
I've I've come to appreciate the fall much more in my middle age here. So
do you have ads? Do you have Twitch ads,
I do have
Zach?
Twitch ads. I'm so sorry,
Oh
James.
no.
But if you just pull the trigger in that $5 a month subscription, you would no longer see the ads. So just little incentive there.
Does ad blocker work on Twitch? It probably does.
I'm not allowed to talk about that as a Twitch affiliate, but
Oh yeah. Okay, you are an affiliate. Okay,
yes,
I'm not. So
I'm not a partner yet, but yeah,
I have true
affiliate.
freedom.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can tell the
And
masses the truth.
on that note, my ambitious friends, their ambitions are to have a nonprofit and have all the grants and donations from or sponsorships from business owners. Like his ambition is to basically grow. We have a bid for our main street, but it's really shaky right now. But basically, it should be expanded to the other neighborhoods that are kind of sort of separate, but really don't need to be separate.
Hmm.
And anyway, it's very ambitious. I don't know if he's ever going to follow up on it because he hasn't talked like this seriously though for a while. But what he does talk seriously about is the whole like form a nonprofit or have a nonprofit, and our organizing and political activities. Like we're paid full time, like we're just on salary, even though we're not
Hmm.
doing a lot or we do a bare minimum. But we're still funded by the petit bourgeois of our city. So um, I'm not sure what kind of serious work we're gonna do because this is the same strategy
Hmm.
of basically all of our boomer senior activist senpais and teachers, and they've been spinning, well, not spinning their wheels, but for 30 years they've been doing this grind, and what community power have they really built in their lifetimes? They can barely sneeze at the mayor or challenge city leadership. So it's like you're just gonna do everything over again, but think you're doing it better because I don't know, you're cooler or something.
Yeah.
That's what That's what I would say to his face, but I'm not because he's bigger than me.
Always a good reason.
And
And hello to Trisha. I hope your connection sticks with us this time. You said you have a storm rolling in though, so
Yeah, you might hear the thunder over my head.
no
Intermittently here,
problem.
but
No problem.
thunder.
yeah, I'm glad it finally connected. How's it going, guys?
Going pretty well. Going pretty well. Um, yeah. So yeah, I guess that's all. I didn't have much else to talk about before, although I do want to shout out my wife's endeavor, her homemade bread baking. Another way you can support the show. We can ship anywhere in the U.S. or Canada. We've had some customers already, including Trisha. And yeah, just know that these are hefty loaves. These are not your Wonder Bread, so it does take a bit of shipping to get it out.
Right, they're huge. They're like dinner plate size and
Yeah.
a couple of pounds each, and they're
Mhm.
delicious. They're
Appreciate
so
it. Thank you.
delicious.
I totally would, but I have an unlimited supply of hearty bread.
Nice.
From we get the leftovers from Bountiful Bread from the Food Not Bombs chapter.
Oh, that's
we
so
always
cool.
have a big sack of their leftover bread.
Nice.
You know, the jalapeno cheesy
Ooh.
bread, and you know, it's just real bread. For
Yeah,
the most
yeah.
part, not as delicious as like Prinzo's, the Italian bakery, but
I'm not familiar with them.
it's hey, I don't have to pay for it, and it's there.
Yeah. Free bread
Otherwise,
is
it's going
the
to the
tastiest
dumpster.
bread.
Saving it from the dumpster.
There you go. That's important work. And James, no, we sadly do not yet have pepperoni rolls, but I will message you personally on the day that Amanda ventures into making such a delectable goodie.
We figured out two things solidly about James. He loves pepperoni rolls and
Pepperoni
Led Zeppelin,
rolls?
and
Yes. Oh my God.
no wrong with either of
With
those.
enough clues, we'll be able to unmask him,
That's
like in
right.
Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which I've been marathoning at the moment.
Oh yeah, is that a newer one? I have not kept
No,
up with
it's
it.
well, it's from. Does 4 years count as old?
I mean, sure.
It's 2019.
It's probably still current. Sure.
It's only two away. Basically, there's one other Assassin's Creed that's been released in the meantime.
Okay.
Um,
What timeline does this one follow? Where you heading in this game?
Odyssey is during the Peloponnesian War, so it's the full
Oh.
Greek one.
Wow. So they're like
and
big pitched battles and stuff like that going on, or?
yeah, they did. It was their kind of new mechanic, I suppose, where the map is broken up into territories, and there's a bunch of kind of activities you can do to lower the power of whether it's Sparta or Athens. And once it's low enough, basically by killing soldiers, you burn their supplies, you kill their leader, whatever.
Wow.
Do a bunch of terrorist activities, one man guerrilla army.
True guerrilla warfare.
Then a battle can take place between the two sides. So then
Okay.
you can choose to either help the defender, which you just weakened, or help the attacker, which is much harder. But I haven't been doing. It's not a mechanic I did a lot of with the game because I'm not interested in really fighting the war. I want justice for my family and do the story. Anyway. What did I want to mention? Oh yeah, I wanted to put out that we're covering fascism, and the thing that comes to mind immediately is it's over the Trump cycle since 2016. Lots of coverage of fascism and in BreadTube land,
Right.
but it's more recently with a kind of takes a 4-year kind of thing where once something gets a lot of attention and it's covered, then you get sort of a re-examination, in this case by Kyle Green of Brows Held High has made a video. It's the most recent one. He doesn't make them very often now.
Brows held high.
Brows Held High, yes. He
Okay.
did art house film critique and reviews.
Okay.
Or analysis of them. And anyway, his latest video is called like, Are We Reading Echo wrong, Albert
Mhm.
Echo. So I did not watch it yet, but maybe it's something we do when we're finished with the actual text.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Brows held high. I'll look that up as we're going along here. But yeah, and I've made it clear from the beginning of this reading that this is a very introductory text. This is by no means an extensive analysis of fascism. It's just it's a few warning signs that Echo saw as he was experiencing it firsthand. So I've recommended The Anatomy of Fascism as a more in-depth text, as well as the Anti-Fascist Handbook, just as more like a practical read about what do you do now that you see fascism.
By Mark Bray.
Yeah, Mark Bray. So pretty quick read, but I thought it was well researched and well presented. So
Now I have his Occupy book.
oh, he has an Occupy book. I have not read that one. Cool. Very good. Is there anything that either of you wanted to shout out or discuss before we get into it, or shall we cruise right into the text?
Not really. I've been laying low the last few months,
Yeah.
as I've
Okay.
discussed.
Yep.
Yeah, not that I can think of right offhand, but who knows what this might bring up, because there are some neo-Nazi groups I've been keeping an eye on, because what the fuck, America?
Yeah. Right.
Oh yeah, but there's also like lots of soft versions of it, where in it was a Gloversville. Anyway, a boony, more boonies like town in my region, where a bakery was opened by a former felon, and like most white felons, they maybe join the white supremacy gang, and they find some spirituality, find God, and in prison, and she has the black sun hanging up in her
Oh,
shop as a spiritual symbol only,
gross.
as
Oh
she
yes,
says.
only. Yeah.
And the mayor didn't really know or care about it, and her customers didn't really, and she basically played stupid or about it, and
Oh,
it's
it's
like, hey,
pretty.
it just represents my the spiritual growth I had in prison. When others were, locals were pointing out, like, this is a Nazi symbol, and the mayor, no, to the mayor's credit, like, they came out like, we're not a place for intolerance, blah blah blah.
Right.
We're obviously, we're just gonna ask her nicely to, like, do you mind not having that up in your shop, because we don't have
Would
many
you
in town.
mind,
We don't have many.
please?
We don't have many in town, you see, and
Like to keep it that way. Yeah.
well,
Wow.
they're not. These are not big towns.
Yeah. 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 And I suppose a little town like that would be vulnerable if not that big of a group moved in. You know.
Well,
That.
it's not that it's like a center of a group, but just like there's a lot of just white trash kind of people with a lot
Sure.
of moving, with white supremacist kind of tendencies, or just
Mhm.
conservative, just
Yeah. Just
general
regular concern.
conservative. Yeah.
But yeah. True enough.
The issue is they're trying to recruit really hard. They're going around,
Oh yeah.
putting up flyers, and they're trying to appeal to the white working class. And it's like, okay, there's ways to address the financial issues that we all need to address without you dragging people into racist trash.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But it seems that when people are getting nervous about the future, they break one of two ways. One is to retreat into something that seems strong and that centralizes power and that sort of thing. And the other is to try and help one another and build community because,
Right.
when you have nothing else to lean on, the community can still be there for one another.
Right.
You got to
So,
be proud about yourself in some way, or have some confidence. And if it's not because you're good farmers, because it's not farming land anymore, and it's
mhm,
not because your job is, warehouse labor, because that's basically the growth industry in the
mhm.
boony areas. Basically, that's where the
Yeah,
distribution points are.
right.
Um, you're left with things like, the superficial skin color and things. And even this kind of lefty leaning guy, I argued with him about, like, they're not going to move off of white pride, so we need to turn white pride into something positive, something
That's
that
the,
isn't toxic. and I was saying like, no, you
Impossibility.
can't. Yeah, it's whiteness itself is the problem, or rather,
Right.
it's exclusionary by its admission.
And that's
And
all it is, yeah.
he was saying like, yeah, well, it's like I want to replace their like posters of Klansmen with Tesla. I'm like, Tesla, he's not white. But it's like, yeah, but they see him as white because he's like, light skinned or whatever, or European. And it's like, well, then it's not a matter of, then it's just white civilization they're being proud of, which is still
Yeah. Western
super,
civilization.
super, egocentric, but
Right.
whatever. But I couldn't move him on that. It was an interesting conversation I had with him.
That's too bad.
I was totally coming from an internationalist perspective, and he just didn't
Sure.
really get it.
Yeah. I mean, he does have the germ of a point there is in that what do we do about whiteness? How do we give it up? And if we give it up, what do we replace with it? People have to have some sort of identity. So what do we do? And I like the communist answer to that. We're all comrades in the struggle against private property and that sort of thing. So that could be an identity to replace it with. But
Yeah, these are the
I don't know.
issues that all past leftist movements had.
Yeah.
They didn't really overcome them. They sort of compromise with those kind of nationalism or ethnic things, and that's
Yeah.
why when things went south, like in Yugoslavia, it was like that's what they had. It wasn't buried or turned around in
Mhm.
any way.
Thing is, though, if the only thing you're seeing left to be proud of is the pale tone of your skin,
Just
you need,
arbitrary stuff.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
you're insecure. You need to, I don't know, find where your actual value really is at as a working class person, as a proletariat, whatever
Yeah.
it can be. But you're not left with anything when you're like, well, the only thing I have left to be proud of is being white. Get the fuck
Yeah.
out of here. You know?
Yep.
But how are you proud of being a worker when the work you're forced to do under our system is like bullshit work,
That's a good question too.
or even when it's a service job?
Yeah.
I think the mecha tanky has like the thing
Oh,
that the meme that's
no.
going around is
Macatank.
service workers aren't productive workers, because like you gotta, if you're not a real
They're not
worker if
making-
you're not
not making a
producing
product.
something, which I don't actually agree with,
Right.
but it's
I would hope not.
The thing is,
Um,
how can you demand that a service be available, but then be like, but these people's efforts are valueless?
Yeah.
That's how we've seen people in, fast food even get, told, well, that's a job for a teenager and shit like that.
Mhm.
It's like, no, you're simultaneously demanding that you have this service available to you while demeaning the people who provide it.
Yeah.
All labor actually has value, regardless of what it is you're doing, whether you are creating or whether you are delivering, whether you are, working a line as a cook. It's all got value. It's all your time and labor and a skill set. There's no such thing as unskilled labor.
no
I
argument,
agree.
but how much of this work is actually demanded? Like it's like not the paradox,
So-
but like the process of people don't have any time, so they need all these other services to get their time back or to save time, which ends up being the time of others. So everyone doesn't have time equally.
Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, there are a lot of jobs. I think it was something like 50% by David Graeber's calculation that really don't need to exist. And it is hard to find meaning if you were, say, like a medical insurance salesperson. Your job really doesn't do anything that's necessary. We could just get rid of that entire profession, and the world will be better for it. Except for a lot of people will be out of work. So yeah, how do you
But you
that right
find
there-
solidarity with those sorts of workers? I mean,
You don't need that work though if basics are actually communally provided. But
right?
this is where in the boonies there's the general yeoman farmer attitude of self-reliance or a refusal to like accept any sort of handout if they see it that way. So
Mhm.
maybe there needs to be some work to figure out what counts as a handout and what counts as community support that's informal, and maybe it just needs to always be informal, in which case this is where anarchist practice has its day.
Hmm.
Right. That's why I love programs like Food Not Bombs, because
Oh yeah.
what if you need food, you can go over there and get it. You're not being asked to fill out a questionnaire and prove your need by, financial records and shit like that. Just you're a human being, you need food for fuel for
Here's
your
food.
suit. We have some here, come get it. Don't let your
Yeah,
families go hungry. You know,
I agree.
that's solidarity, that's community support
I
at your
agree.
finest here. And I think that concept needs to expand to apply to things like housing,
Everything. Housing. Yeah.
healthcare, education, the works. If it's necessary
Transportation.
for survival, then that's
Mhm.
something that we should be coming together to make happen for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. And I think in those networks, maybe we could find that sort of identity that people could latch onto instead of something as arbitrary as skin color or, you know, anything like that.
Right.
People coming together to do a thing communally. That's kind of the basis of culture. So that seems like a new culture could even just arise out of that.
But it seems like class needs to erode first, because in my where I live, it seems like class lines are a big barrier to the working together type of
Mm.
ethic.
Hmm. You mean class lines like the Marxist sense of working
No, no,
class and
no.
or just
Like
like income level?
income, geography,
Yeah.
and so on. The the poverty traps that various people are in, as well as the kind of petty bourgeois traps that I was mentioning with, like, my activist buddies, or people who are aspiring activists, who believe that the only way they can maintain such a activity is to be paid to by do it through nonprofit, where they have a salary which is maintained by grants and petit bourgeois
Mm.
sponsorship,
Gotcha.
or small businesses is what I mean. And it seems like a dead end, because it's something the boomers did, and basically they've only created small pockets of community activity, but nothing substantial, nothing that could
Sure.
ever hope to actually solve any problems, but is just a drip.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, so many nonprofits just fall into the cycle
It
of
only slows
grant
down the
writing.
crawl of blight and then gentrification
At
later.
its best, if it doesn't just end up being a self-perpetuating bureaucracy where you're just holding galas and fundraisers mostly to support the salaries of the people that work for it,
Oh
and then
yeah,
maybe a
I
little bit goes to the actual cause.
I said hell
So
no to that when
yeah.
I was under such a guy, and so when my other friend, who's 40, 40, um, but very experienced, a lot of energy, but also not a lot of energy at the same time, um,
40.
bipolar kind of guy,
Feel
Hmm.
and he kind of has the same ambition, even though, like, I didn't say, it's like, you kind of sound like Clifton, who is this total scumbag, um, who had me, like, working for him, but he was paying me with money that he was getting as I think it was a Pell Grant he got to go to community college. Like,
Sure.
he was taking the bare minimum number of classes to get the
To get the Pell
education
Grant.
grant, which was
Okay.
like $1,600, and that was my salary for 2 months. Um,
Okay.
didn't feel cool with that.
Yeah.
And
No.
if I was going to get paid again, I basically had to fundraise for it, and have a
Mm,
fundraiser for a campaign that didn't exist, or at least it would be for the next campaign, but that wouldn't be for 2 years. So I'm like, why would I fundraise for something that's not going to happen for at least start a year and a half from now? That's so disingenuous. Who would come? Who would I
right.
get to come? I
Right.
don't know
Yeah.
your people. And he wanted me to organize. I never organized such a thing before. So I basically twiddled my thumbs, and he got mad at me, and I basically quit, got fired.
Oh.
Maybe we need a term for that, where you're quitting and you're getting fired at the same time, because, like, you do something to get yourself fired as a way of quitting.
Purposely getting yourself fired. Yeah.
Pretty much. I've done it twice.
Hmm. Yeah. Well. I can't think of anything clever off the top of my head, but yeah, there should be a there should be a term for that. All right, well, why don't we get into the text then, and we can use that as a jumping off point from there. So we only got 10 minutes left of the text, so shouldn't be too hard to finish it up. He's going to go pretty quickly through the points, I think. So here we go. Oh, whoops.
It's not playing yet.
I forgot to put it up on the screen. That might help out.
Mm-hmm.
Let me back it up there a couple seconds.
Eggheads,
So where do you leave
effort
off?
snobs. Universities are nests of reds.
Yeah,
The official
just at
fascist
this point.
intellectuals were mainly engaged in attacking modern culture and the liberal intelligentsia for having betrayed traditional values.
Hey,
No
that sounds familiar.
syncretistic faith can withstand analytical criticism. The critical spirit makes distinctions, and to distinguish is a sign of modernism. 4. No syncretistic faith can withstand analytical criticism. The critical spirit makes distinctions, and to distinguish is a sign of modernism. In modern culture, the scientific community praises disagreement as a way to improve knowledge. For fascism, disagreement is treason.
Yeah,
Would this
I'd
be
say
the
that-
first time you've heard the points of like the identifying fascism?
I've read this book before,
Okay.
so,
Yeah.
but it's been a while. I think it was about a year ago that I read it, so it's kind of fresh. But yeah, definitely, you see in these fascist movements, it seems like oftentimes they'll even purposely make contradictory statements just to test their members and see whether or not they are loyal. And then a good way to prove your loyalty is to deny reality in order to, follow the leaders. So,
Well, or is everyone on the same page and in the same unreality?
yeah.
Where universities are bastions of communism and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, I somehow made it all the way through 4 years of undergraduate and 2 years, actually like 3 years of grad school, never having communism brought up in class even once.
Oh, you're so deprived then. 'Cause I did not. I had lots of it actually.
Yeah, really?
Oh yeah, I was in a very unique school though, City College of New York.
That's cool. I mean, I wish I had been exposed to this back in college instead of having just come to it on my own, but was not to be.
5. Besides, disagreement is a sign of diversity. Fascism grows up and seeks for consensus by exploiting and exacerbating the natural fear of difference. The first appeal of a fascist or prematurely fascist movement is an appeal against the intruders. Thus, fascism is racist by definition.
Okay. Seems to be a pretty common one. Just general xenophobia and racism. So
Wait, but isn't that assuming that any kind of intruder has to be of a different race? Because obviously that's not always the case. Or rather,
True.
it's spun together between degenerates of the sexual or gender nature, nonconformists of any kind. The intruder is, ideological, and then
That's
it gets bound together. There's intersectionality.
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like that could be expanded a bit, or
Yeah,
the
maybe-
the language could be tweaked, which I think is
Sure.
sort of the only critique against Echo's definition of fascism, that his various kind of descriptors of fascist movements
Mhm.
could be tweaked kind of a bit to be more accurate or a bit more precise.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, the things he's describing could be any reactionary movement, which isn't too helpful unless you're trying to identify reactionary
Yeah.
movements. I mean, doesn't an anarchist clique just like seek consensus? or
True.
or like what is really there's obviously a big difference
Hmm.
between a group or a nation that wants to have a political consensus and a fascist one.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I guess to have a group, you are by definition defining yourself in terms of the other or the others. So,
An inside
but
and an outside, and
and
having
yeah,
a
in group, out
boundary.
group. Um, I guess it's the way that you look at the outside as though it's
Yeah.
completely irredeemable, uh, only going to bring destruction to you if any of its members are let in, and I guess how much diversity of opinion within your movement you allow.
It was
So
actually during an urban design lecture that the lecturer focused on the difference between a boundary and a border. That groups, nations, neighborhoods, cities should have boundaries so
yeah.
that there's a delineation of this or that,
Hmm.
and that you can actually only kind of have diversity in the mosaic by having these boundaries versus a border. And a boundary is porous; you can move across it. A border is something that is static and separates. Um, and so, but then like say the EU, you have soft borders or open borders,
Yeah.
which are more like boundaries. The boundary between Belgium and France versus the border between um, Bulgaria and Turkey.
So a boundary would be more like a social sort of psychological thing where it's just you think of these things as separate, whether or not they are, and then a border would be something that is
Well, they can be both.
physically separate.
Yeah, they can be both. Oh
Sure, it
no, a
could be both.
boundary can be psychological, but I mean it's not an enforced thing. It's simply
Okay,
a map, or it's political, or it's cultural.
sure,
The difference between the Goth part of town and the chic part of town.
cool. All right, let's keep moving. Number 6.
6. Other fascism derives from the individual or social frustration. That is why one of the most typical features of the historical fascism was the appeal to a frustrated middle class, a class suffering from an economic crisis or feelings of political humiliation, and frightened by the pressure of lower social groups. In our time, when the old proletarians are becoming petty bourgeois and the lumpen are largely excluded from the political scene, the fascism of tomorrow will find its audience in this new majority.
Thoughts on that one?
I do actually, only because I've been listening to a bunch of lectures or interviews with David Douglas Lane and
Oh, I like Doug Lane.
a guy named Chris Catrone, who's like the last real Marxist. Interesting character, real character.
No, I'm not familiar with him.
Like him a lot actually, but he has a lot of controversial things to say, I suppose. But one of the things they agreed on, or just only Doug Lane's kind of milieu, is that it's not humiliation of the middle class or any particular group that leads to this stuff, but that there's a transitionary period happening, that things are changing. The
Yeah.
status is changing. So humiliation is a change in status, I suppose, but a lot of other things can be the cause or is the change. But I think what makes people crazy, act irrationally or upset or reactionary, is that, or like our times, and to reflect our times, is that the changing, the transition is ongoing. And if anything, it feels permanent. That, we really, if we just got somewhere, we wouldn't
Hmm.
feel so, humiliated, or that things are going wrong and we need to act, or we need to we need to deal with the problem. And then of course the demagoguery comes into simple solutions of what the problem is. Because if we were transitioning towards a more socialist or anarchist society, at least we'd be going somewhere, and people maybe would go along to get along. But because we're constantly transitioning, like in flux, and this is like on social level, like with the America, we're declining. We want to transition away from being the global hegemon, or we are, whether we like it or not, and that's what's humiliating or driving people nuts,
Mhm.
or to fascism. And or it can be personal, that we're all, us millennials are still, we're in arrested development. Like, we still
Yeah.
feel like we're always teenagers. We're never hitting adulthood,
Right.
whether because of the economic factors that prevent us from having the normal economic life, or by, as also put out, to participate in society in a meaningful way, which is everyone who's in under the 80% economic percentile cannot meaningfully participate in society. So we all feel like we're all infantilized.
Yeah.
We're all still teenagers waiting to turn 18 or 21 and join society, even though we can
Yeah.
drive and have a real
Get
job or
get the
whatever.
real
It
job,
still
the
doesn't
house.
matter
Yeah.
because we're not producing real things, or we're not able to buy real things or afford real things.
Yeah. Interesting. So you're talking about the changes happening. I kind of wonder. I heard this. I don't even know what you call it, a critique, but someone was trying to define fascism as a reaction to basically social progress. I don't know if it was even social progress, but more. They said
The
they were.
existence of a socialist movement,
Yeah,
because
yeah. There has to be
when
socialism.
it came to the 20s and 30s, it was the previous 20 years you actually had a real socialist movement,
Sure.
and it was big enough or strong enough to actually do some shit,
Yeah.
whether it's the Russian Revolution or the Spartacus Revolt, or not enough to take over the whole, all the governments, but it's certainly big enough to hold a general strike and shut things down, or to be a fight, like an actual, like, start assassinating people, like the
Mm.
anarchists in the 20s. It was big enough or strong enough that it was starting to be a threat, and it was slowly crushed or disintegrated over the 20s and the
Yeah.
30s, and thus
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
rise of fascism. And although it still existed, again, this is a Chris Catrone point, that the left actually was killed in 1920, and no way, like, and then it became statist. The left became permanently statist.
Hmm.
There was no socialist slash anarcho-socialist movement anymore,
Hmm.
that could survive or win in any real way, unless it became statist, and we've been living with that ever since.
Yeah.
um,
Well,
as far as, like, if social democrats are the only kind of lefty that can hold power,
yeah.
which or that, or you, what was the other thing, like, this, whether it's the Soviet Union making its revisionist turn, or what have you,
Hmm.
or the IWW losing big time by the mid-20s.
I mean, it makes me wonder if fascism would be as effective if there wasn't that boogeyman of the left to point at and be like, look at all this change that these people want to insert into society. That's the reason that you can't get a better job. That's the reason that
Yeah.
there's no more social mobility.
Yeah,
So it's kind of this misdirection and scapegoating the left.
Yeah, they became a scapegoat, even though by 1930
Yeah,
we
yeah.
weren't, at least outside of the Soviet Union, not holding power. But in the 20s, the Soviet Union was still civil war for half of that time, and yeah, it's just a perspective that Chris Cutrone was putting on things, which I found very, sort of, a little illuminating. Actually, it kind of uncovered some things in my mind.
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, it seems like today we have very similar conditions. Like we don't have a very strong labor movement, but we have the beginnings of one. We see these organizing drives happen in one big corporation after another, and at the same time, there's very strong social progressive movements. You know, with all the issues of LGBTQ, Black Lives Matter, stuff like that. So these are all seem to be easy targets for the right to just fearmonger and build their build up fascism as a reaction to all these perceived threats. When
Yeah,
yeah,
including the system itself is a
yeah,
threat to people, and
yeah, because it's not working for
um,
people anymore.
but
Hmm.
like how any anarchist that's still a capitalist isn't really a radical, or wasn't the point, but it was if I'm losing it. I've been listening to too much stuff at work. I suppose it's all blending together. It
It
doesn't.
sounds
It
like
doesn't
interesting
help.
stuff, though.
It doesn't help that I'm mixing the intellectual kind of lecture stuff I listen to with the usual, the serfs and
Yeah,
Hassan
yeah.
bullshit.
There's another one that I found recently, or gotten into recently. That's R.M. Brown. Are you familiar with this guy?
Oh yes, very
Either of
much
you?
so.
Yeah, yeah. He's just fun.
Really funny. Not for making any viable points, but just
Right.
the drops. It's
But
all the
yeah,
drops. The
it's like
drops do all the work, but I love it, and I'm gonna introduce you to one. Um, but yeah, he finds new drops. He incorporates them in his shtick. It's very funny.
I'm curious about, from either of you, your take on some of these newer neo-Nazi groups like NSC 131 and Pat Socks that I
oh boy.
call Star Spangled Ding Dongs.
Oh shit.
Nationalists, like they seek to have, a more socialist financial system, but they want it for the benefit of only white people. They want it at everybody else's fucking expense. They you know, a lot of their driving factor is being anti-Antifa,
Right.
but they, when it comes to even Marxist ideals and things like that, like they've studied the fuck out of it. They're thoroughly well versed on socialist ideology. They just want to only apply it to white people. They want to have a white ethno state, which means either booting out or killing off in order to eradicate everybody else. So I'm
Do any
curious.
do any of the do any of the self-described Pat Socks talk like that? Because I would not call them fascist.
They have some. I have
Um,
trouble getting my head around where they actually stand on any given issue because I mean, the people like Caleb Maupin are promoting Alexander Dukin, who was the originator of the Nazbol term and movement. Um, Haas himself, I don't know.
There's something of there's something of a, I mean, I'm not taking them at their word. This is my observation that appearing at the same conference, being in the same panel, isn't the same as an endorsement, and I wouldn't even call it an affiliation. I think there's this language of affiliation being used that doesn't quite fit to me. Yeah, they have a lot of gross takes, but takes are not the same things as a platform.
True
And if
enough.
you
True
actually
enough.
kind of look at their platform, or when they're actually serious about what they like want to do, it is all aesthetics
Hmm.
and some activism, street activism, but it's not really building anything real or viable.
True.
But they do go to international conferences. That's what Malpin, he's rich enough to do this stuff, I guess.
Right.
And you feel like you're actually part of an international movement or community because you actually interact with it, even though
Hmm.
they're doing the real activism or work. Or they're all just aesthetically, what do you call it, aesthetically based
Yeah.
kind of activists with the money to meet in some peripheral place. Um, but
the
like,
reason I bring up
yeah.
those because they are actually doing coalition politics right now. The leaders of NSC 131 have managed to link up and start a White Lives Matter coalition, working with Pat Socks, with Patriot Front, with Proud Boys, etc.,
Hmm.
for a white power coalition.
Hmm.
So that's why I bring it up, because that's
Hmm.
part of their recruiting efforts there, of trying to appeal to the white working class and trying to get them all on their side for building an ethno state.
Yes. Okay. Right. Yeah. So right. The confusion comes in, or not the confusion, but like the finger pointing comes in with the Pat Sox will prioritize coalition building with the yes, with the white supremacist orgs, or social groups, social clubs, um, which are all still very much aesthetic outside of their random beat ups or whatever. Yeah, that's what I mean by gross politics. When it comes online, it's all aesthetics, like with Haas. I actually listened to him for an hour, not just someone talking over him or whatever. And it was kind of, he's very upfront that he's acting only in the realm of aesthetics and internet memes, which is as, I mean, it's pathetic, but
Yeah.
he's not,
Fair enough.
I don't think he's ironically, well, I don't hate what his aesthetics are as far as like being this calling out rad libs and so on. It's so I just have mixed feelings about, at least about a guy named Haas, because he is like, he hates Colin Malpin and the rest of the Pat Sox because he's like this. He's like, I'm done with these posers.
Oh, I didn't know about this
They,
split.
they want to work. Well, it's just in the last week, basically.
This
He's
is part of
declared,
his.
he's declared the new aesthetic of the mega tanky, and
I heard that whole rant.
it's funny
That was,
because he hates. He was
pretty epic.
when people were like, oh, like an anime, and he's like, fuck anime, fuck all that, that's degenerate bullshit. It's just like he's very self-aware that it's a comedy act. He's entertaining, and he's putting in a little ML politics in there, and that's what he thinks his service is that he is at least introducing some, what do you call it, the fuck, the edgelords, teenage edgelords to ML ideas, which doesn't make them better activists or people, but I don't know. It's sort of like when you have like capitalist cartoons and it introduces people to the ideas of community and activism in a way like Hey Arnold did. Though it was Hey Arnold, and I actually had people in my real life who did that stuff. So it was reinforced with reality, which is not the case with terminally internet online people. But at least Haas is self-aware that he is terminally online, and he doesn't pretend to be anything else. It's the other Pat Sox that Patricia mentions are terminally online, but also do things like at least Caleb Mopham, like he was lit dropping or he was soapboxing at Union Square, but I don't know what else he does.
Yeah,
probably nothing. But
I guess
he's a journalist.
The statement of his that worries me the most was that when he was asked about Alexander Dugin, and his response was basically, the only thing that we disagree on is the materialist view of history. And he seemed sincere about it. So, I mean, that's worrying. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean, and by the way, I endorse every single thing he's ever said. But it's just like, it kind of sticks with me in a bad way.
The crime I'll always kind of go to sticking on people is that they're really bad at defending themselves. Because like I prefer the Steelman approach of like, okay, like I just did with Haas. I just Steelman, like, what's the best interpretation of his bullshit?
Right.
I can do the same from not so much Moppin. He's definitely like a edgelord bad actor. But let's say Peter Coffin. He's keeping bad company by being in Coffin's orbit. And but I do like his perspective for the most part. And I don't think he identifies as a Pat Sock. Pat Sock seems to be a very, very specific, like, I don't even know who identifies as a Pat Sock. I know I did read on my show an article or a commentary by someone calling for patriotic socialism.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't any whiteness subtext to it. It was just very much like, if there was any subtext, it was maybe there's a very heavily very likely that it will turn into being pro-imperialist or supportive of American imperialist the project. Because if you're going to be patriotic, that's how it's defined. The American being pro the American century,
Yeah. It's like my country, right?
extending into the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's funny that Chris Catrone kind of brought up that like America was always of two minds about being the global hegemon. We want to do it, but we also don't. Our policy wants to do it, but also doesn't want to do it. So there's the side of America that's a manifest destiny. We're the light of the world, best country because of our institutions, and this is something conservatives and liberals will agree on. And that's why we need to intervene everywhere and be the global hegemon and take on all that responsibility. But throughout like the actual progressives at the time, back in the 20s, because we had a socialist movement maybe too. I don't know, it didn't really overlap too much. But it was against all of that. It was against being the hegemon, taking over for the British or whatever, the whole way. And they bit by bit, I let's see, when did the switch happen? Where like, I think it was the fight against communism, I suppose, that kind of silenced the voices, or brought over any voices that were against being the hegemon. It's like, no, for the sake of our privileges and economic system, we got to fight communism, and that means being the global hegemon because the British are in no situation to do it. But yes, James, that's what it means to be the global hegemon, to police the world.
Yeah.
America!
Fuck yeah!
Coming to save the motherfucking day!
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I've only watched that movie all the way through once.
I think I've only seen it maybe twice too, because like you pretty much get it the first time.
It's one of those satires that just like doesn't undermine what it's making fun of, though.
True, because there's a lot of racial crap.
It's making well, racial bullshit aside, just like the message of the movie is a big joke. But I mean that's Matt and Trey to a T. All of their satire. I know they've kind of grown up the last 5-6 years with South Park. I haven't watched too much of it, but I know like they've been less serious with like, we're going to make fun of everybody. We're actually are going to focus on making fun of the corporate state and sticking to satirizing that.
Well, that's
and
good.
not satirizing hippies as much, or if at all, is like, or if they do, they're satirizing, wokeism, liberals, corporate liberals, the whole like, we're going to be woke, but we're not going to actually change how things work. But yeah, satire, if it isn't reinforcing what could be better, then it's worthless to me. I don't like it.
Yeah, I can see that. And that's kind of
hollow.
One of the big shortfalls of the whole Colbert Report. It's that the right oftentimes thought that he legitimately was on their side and just making fun of liberals. So it kind of loses the whole point then.
As well as anything by Mike Judge.
Yeah, yes.
Who's constantly frustrated himself by how he makes things that satire the parts of American society that disgust him.
Mm-hmm.
And then it ends up encouraging, if not perpetuating, those things. Going all the way back to Beavis and Butthead. Like he was making fun of the kind of cruel teenage shitlord activity.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it ended up inspiring, or it became a hit with that audience.
Yep.
Because
he
wasn't it was King of the Hill, which is more popular because he does kind of do things to point out, like, when I make fun of something, I'm pointing out why it's wrong or why it's bad.
Yeah.
With Beavis and Butthead, that never happens, except for a few instances. I was just watching someone doing, like, I watched all Beavis and Butthead to do an analysis, and he kind of discovered that not only it got better with each season, but the only like he had to really look for the times where like things happen to Beavis and Butthead. They don't like they're just ghosts in their own lives and they're losers. Oh yeah, and yeah, like he was pointing out all the episodes where they are in fact the losers,
Yeah.
that they're actually pathetic and they're
Mm-hmm.
not cool at all. They
Not at
just think
all.
they're
Yeah.
cool. And all the times that Butthead is the actual villain, that Beavis could actually be a good person if Butthead wasn't abusing him all the time.
Controlling him. Yeah.
Yeah, which is interesting to make it like that there usually is some abuser in these situations where there's a few people who are all assholes. There's really one person that's damaged and they're just damaging the others.
Yep.
But I don't know. It's not enough unless it's. But you can't just anvil people with moralism, But
True.
I'm
It's
okay
difficult.
with the hokiness of doing that at times, but
Mhm.
it's like there is a balance, and I know it exists with certain shows. We could probably talk about that.
Yeah.
Brainstorm
Yeah.
which shows. I mean, Hey Arnold does this fantastically. Actually.
Uh-huh.
That's my example of it does moralism where it's both satirizing, like Harold is like called out on bullshit, or like, oh, stop giving a speech, Arnold. But half the time things work out because he's like this.
Because
"We
he
gotta
just
do the
sticks
right
with his
thing."
moral compass. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and things actually work out, and people appreciate him, and
Uh-huh.
or there's many times where he helps someone and they thank him, but then they're just as bad as before, like the Stoop Kid, where it's like now I can harass people on and off my stoop.
That was the best part of that episode.
Or it's like, it wasn't really why I did it.
Let's try to help you be a better person. But yeah. What a good show. We've been watching that at bedtime every night. Hey Arnold. It's been a nice nostalgia trip.
All the historic preservation episodes, there's like a dozen of them.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely did not notice that the first time when I was
The whole
young.
point where the movie is the historic preservation plot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't know about that movie until very recently.
Anti-gentrification.
We watched it.
It was anti-gentrification before it was cool. Because it was starting all the way back then.
Uh-huh.
Well, I mean, urban renewal's been around since
Like 70s, yeah.
since the 30s.
No, yeah. True enough. All right. Why don't we dive back into the text here? Because it's after 8 o'clock. I want to make sure we get through it. And then we'll continue on the banter.
7. To people who feel deprived of a clear social identity, Fascism says that their only privilege is the most common one, to be born in the same country. This is the origin of nationalism. Besides, the only ones who can provide an identity to the nation are its enemies. Thus, at the root of fascist psychology, there is the obsession with a plot, possibly an international one. The followers must feel besieged. The easiest way to solve the plot is the appeal to xenophobia, but the plot must also come from the inside. Jews are usually the best target because they have the advantage of being at the same time inside and outside. In the US, a prominent instance of the plot obsession is to be found in Pat Robertson's The New World Order, but as we have recently seen, there are many others. 8.
Wait, isn't that is this from like a recent edition?
Not that I'm aware of.
Mentioning Pat Robertson kind of dates the text. This is not written.
Well,
but
he is old as fuck. But
Did
did he write this back in the? I thought he wrote it in the 50s, or is it?
I thought it was the 50s too. Let me check real quick.
Okay.
that makes me curious because I
Or
mean,
it's a new
Pat
edition.
Robertson from Christo Fascist as fuck and all about it on TV for decades. So you know,
Yeah.
Wait a minute now.
That's why it couldn't be believed that all the Jews in Orange County, Florida, voted for him. Well, that's Pat Buchanan. We were talking about different people. Anyway. But regardless, I actually wanted to, I want to question or interrogate he made nationalism sound like it was something immaterial. But when we talk of shared culture and language, I mean, this isn't something to really fight wars over unless, well, the thing is, though, like, Like, I'm just talking about Europe here. Like we had borders running through cultural areas where certain language speakers were on one side of a border or another because these lines were driven by empires that were feudalistic or aristocracies. And nationalism, just as in say peripheral struggles, Marxist struggles, the nationalism plays a part in asserting your own sovereignty, human rights, etc., and the right to be in the same polity where Hungarians, all the Hungarians. The issue comes in though because of imperialism that you had all these pockets of German speakers around the Balkans because the Austrians would settle people um, for the specific reason that then they have an anchor there. Um, but then you get the mess of post World War One where it's like, okay, we got to fix this and move all the people back around instead of having some larger. Well, we need a super state, but isn't ruled like controlled by one ethnic group, but all of them. Which is where you get federalism, like Yugoslavia, but that's post World War II, not post World War One. Although it tried, post World War One, Yugoslavia tried to be. It was like, okay, we'll have a king, but it's going to be a Serbian king, Serbian military. Not really fair.
Even a lot of what's going on in Europe is directly related to the same concepts, like with Ukraine. They got salty as fuck.
Oh.
Team because people
You're breaking up just a little bit, Trisha.
who are ethnic Russian, ethnic Jewish, ethnic want their independence from Ukraine, and with this not happened there, they're like, wait a minute, we can't have that. We're just slaughtering all these people in eastern Ukraine for not wanting to be part of Ukraine anymore. It's fucking sad, They literally made it illegal to speak. How weak is that?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be an issue.
Not a good look.
It wouldn't be an issue if you had multiple official languages, which many more progressive nation states do, but then the autocratic ones don't, and that's where you get Civil War stuff happening. And whether it's Kurds in Turkey, or what have you. But but then there's always the whole nation building. At least originally was about like having a standard single language from a center. The capital's dialect would be the dialect, and that's how you have some Northern German dialects not really existing anymore, being really rare. I only know this because I'm watching an ASM artist who's Viennan, and so she's done videos covering languages, language books, history of German, different dialects of German, and of course tons of videos about Vienna.
Cool. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Vienna,
Mostly about how there were fears when Austria joined the EU that they would have to integrate because the difference between Austrian German and the Northern and other German, Bavarian German, is just in vocabulary, and they were like afraid that they would have to standardize and lose some of their different words for food items. They didn't have to, of course, they didn't have to, but it was like, I guess it was a debate.
Wow. Really worried about those words for food items, huh?
Yeah, imagine
national importance.
Well, imagine you can't call poutine. You have to call it cheesy fries.
Oof, the horror.
And the Korpaka would definitely revolt from that.
They probably would, actually, if you tried to mess with their poutine.
Or name a food item in Minnesota.
Oh God, cheese curds, I guess, is our big one. Or hot dish, just casserole everywhere else.
Well, what you could take from Albany is, this is strange because it doesn't seem like a big deal growing up, but like we will serve mozzarella sticks with a fruity dipping sauce, like raspberry.
A fruit? Whoa. I've
Raspberry.
never had it that way.
Apparently, Albany is the only place that does it.
That sounds really good, actually.
It is good. It's
You
great.
got the savory and the sweet together with the salty. Wow,
it works.
yeah.
And yet we're the only people
Yeah.
that do it because in the capital of New York is the only place that the refined palate would want like cheese and fruit together. But the mozzarella sticks, because of the Italian population, yes. But
Yeah.
um,
Interesting.
but now I'm wondering how many places we're slowly losing all the bars that would do it.
Really?
Maybe
It's a
we
threat,
need
yeah.
to. Well, I don't know. Well, only because the place around the block from me was turned from a standard bar that had mozzarella with raspberry sauce, but is now a more upscale dining tapas place
Oh. They did
with
away with
cauliflower,
the
with
fruit.
ground cauliflower with lime.
Ground cauliflower? Don't
Yeah,
know about
rice
that one.
cauliflower. Rice cauliflower dish.
Cauliflower is not my favorite vegetable. I like it at like buffalo cauliflower, like when it's supposed to be done up like
It has
an
to be
alternative
marinated.
to
It's
buffalo
like
wings.
It's like
but-
tofu. It has to be. It's
Yeah,
not a
it's
lot
fine
of
if it
nutrition.
absorbs the.
Not a lot of
the
nutrition,
flavor.
but marinated all to get out.
Yeah,
and it's
that's
edible.
fine. That's fine.
Which can be said of all meat, by the way. And
True enough. True enough.
There's a few
Yeah.
brands like Cauliflower that make really good cauliflower pizza crusts.
I have had a good
Yes.
cauliflower pizza crust.
And loaded cauliflower with like the bacon and cheese and sour cream. Really
well,
fucking
you,
good.
you have to add all that other stuff,
That's just-
like a potato. It's like just have a potato. That's the
Well,
difference.
I mean, we started doing this because of people who are trying to watch the carb count and actually get
Oh,
complex
it's the
carbs,
whole keto
vegetables,
thing, huh?
instead of, the very starchy, simple carbs from
Yeah.
So I'm one of those people who was like, fuck it, I'll try this.
Mhm.
Just an effort to try to lose weight and take some
Mhm.
strain off my back and stuff, and ended up getting hooked on those things. And I'm not a huge cauliflower fan, but I really do love the loaded cauliflower that's mashed, and the cauliflower pizzas. They're pretty fucking good.
Cauliflower.
It's one way I can actually consume cauliflower and not be like, ugh, this bland shit.
Well, my way of dealing with it is, and it's only when Food Not Bombs provides me with a head of cauliflower, is chopping it up into, dicing it and just tossing it with some curry powder and seasoning, and then baking it
Nice.
like
I
like
like
you
curry.
would potatoes, I suppose.
Hell yeah.
Maybe I'll have to give cauliflower a second chance then. Try
I got the
some-
idea
Like
from the co-op that would make a tandoori cauliflower. they call it.
See, I like tandoori spices. That's a good palette of spice.
James bringing back the pepperoni roll.
I was wondering how long it was going to be before James chimed in with his pepperoni rolls.
He also says Beavis and Butthead was a good, wholesome show.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man.
We're never gonna
But now y'all
score.
made me hungry for cheese sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, cheese sticks are a fucking addiction of mine.
They're pretty good. You wouldn't think of just eating 6 to 12 just pieces of string cheese like that,
Oh, string cheese. Ew.
but like deep fry it, yeah, batter and
Okay.
deep fry.
Well, I mean, my 6 is my limit, but that's when it's served. But,
I guess I've never eaten 12 myself, but
and it has to
served
be
12
really
before.
good. I think the bar on the other side of the neighborhood has good mozzarella sticks
Cool.
because it's not from a frozen package. They seem to actually do it.
Ah.
Anyway, because I guess that's our upstate New York specialty.
Yeah, supposedly that's better. That's what they do with the cheese curds too. They're like, if you don't freeze them, you just like lightly refrigerate them. Apparently, they retain their squeak and some sort of structure when you're eating them and stuff like that. So
Were you the one talking about cheese curds for like half an hour in a previous stream, or what? Did I imagine that somewhere?
I don't think it was me. I don't think I've spent that long talking about cheese curds. I think this is probably the first
I
time
guess
I've brought
maybe
it
it
up.
was Hassan and his stun walk about cheese.
Could that I would believe for sure. Yeah.
I am jealous that he went to the LA Anime Con and had some
Yep.
fun there. But I've yet to
Yeah.
actually go to one. But I'm sort of I don't want to spend like hundreds of dollars,
Those
especially
things are
like
expensive, man.
I don't exactly. We do
Mhm.
have them around here though.
Yeah, we have one too. I forgot what it's called. Something con. But like they rent out an entire DoubleTree hotel, and there's just like, all the same sorts of things,
My
speakers.
there is an alternative of sorts, but it needs to be organized by a well group of nerds. Is at RPI, Premier Engineering College of the country. Um, there was a Genericon. It was called Genericon. It was an anime con
Generic.
of their own mate, where they had an artist gallery and they filled the gym with vendors, but also card tournament setups. And it was
Mm.
pretty good, affordable price of $30. They would have all the lecture rooms because it's a college, and they would have movies playing on a bunch of lecture halls, and then others would be panels. Um, very very fun, a lot of fun, but haven't done it because of COVID, and I don't think they're bringing it back. I heard the bad news.
Mm.
Because again, it's
That's too bad.
college students doing it, and I keep getting older, and it doesn't feel right. But and the adult ones are probably too commercial, So, but I guess I have to give it a
Yeah,
shot eventually. Now that I have an income, I can actually I'll bite the bullet
yeah,
and pay.
definitely. Yeah, let me know how it goes.
Mm.
Oh, by the way, I looked up this book, Fascism, was written. It was an essay. First appears an essay in 1995. So I thought it was a lot older
Oh,
than
okay.
than it was. But I guess it's much more modern of a text. So that explains the Pat Robertson.
Yeah,
Circling all the way back to that.
fucking 95. I was already too well aware of Pat Robertson's Christian fascism.
Really? Mm.
Yeah, on the TV all the time, and many of my relatives have.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
too bad.
yeah.
That's too
Uh,
bad. Yeah, man. All right. Well, let's move on. I think we're on point number 8.
The followers must feel humiliated by the ostentatious wealth and force of their enemies. When I was a boy, I was taught to think of an Englishman as the 5-meal people. They ate more frequently than the poor but sober Italians. Jews are rich and help each other through a secret web of mutual assistance. However, the followers must be convinced that they can overwhelm the enemies. Thus, by a continuous shifting of rhetorical focus, the enemies are at the same time too strong and too weak.
Yeah, we definitely hear a lot about that today with all the blue-haired SJWs, controlling our kids' minds and, being groomers and all these things that they keep dredging up. Well, at the same time, ridiculing their strength and if they're men, their masculinity, on and on. So they
Not their
same sort
strength,
of
but
pattern.
just it's I'm not saying it's evolved or changed much, but
Yeah.
and we are working off of a text like these, essays like these, when we say, oh, these
Hmm.
white Rangburgers, they're saying we're both strong and weak. But
Hmm.
I don't know. It's more. I think there's different proportions. I think it's like it feels like 70% we're so strong because we woke people are embedded in corporate America and the Democratic Party and those power structures, government bureaucracy, because that's where because I don't know, because bureaucracy is a sort of, at least utopian fashion, trying to be fair, for rules and things like that, and it does in fact, depending on the department here at New York, actually provides pretty good training to not be a sexual harasser or have good security culture. Um, but it's like it feels like it's 70%, like because we're wokeism, rad lib points and culture aesthetics are seen and visible, Rachel Maddow types, and seeing that as the enemy, and we're just like enough like them to be associated
Hmm.
aesthetically anyway, not because of actual beliefs or whatever, because that doesn't matter. We're working off of aesthetics because that's how everyone's working. And then it's 30%. We're making fun of how weak and pathetic and so on. It's like it's sort of like it's also different people at times. It's like there's on one hand you're laughing at the basement dwell. You're like the supporters of wokeism, who are jobless losers in their basement, millennials who don't want to work, and lazy layabouts and thugs, and so it's sort of like there seems to be like a, what is it when you make things flat, like the way others see the world as flat, when they don't really see the world as flat. They see it as a mosaic of different groups. They all hate them for the same or different reasons, and they may all lump them together in a talking point referring to the left, but they are talking about different groups, and they maybe in their mind see them as playing different functions. They all have the role in as being the enemy. Meanwhile, we can also see that there's many different sides to the ruling class or to the fascists out there, and that they all have their different roles. Because there are different, we live in a world of differences. Because when I would talk to, say, the old woman I would do chores for, and all the different groups or things she would complain about that she got from the TV or from Facebook, she wasn't always talking about the same group, or I would ask a clarifying question of who are you talking about, or why do you think they're lazy, or why do you think they're in charge or they're in power, or why you feel helpless, because obviously you're part of a silent majority, right? Or something of that nature. So it seems like 30% were really weak and pathetic, but like we're also followers of the wokes, of woke culture, which is in, with Biden as president is like we're in power. Obviously we're in power because we have a Democratic president, and we all love Biden, right? So so they're flattening all of us at the same time as well, but it's obviously those things. So that dynamic, it's true. The point stands. But I don't think it's always like it's 50-50. We're both as strong and weak.
Sure.
But because they obviously don't see losers and thugs as being in charge, but they do see them as having more political power somehow as them, even though they're voting and donating and what have you. But they're all equally not participating in society in a meaningful way. And so that's what it kind of comes down to. They are convinced through propaganda that a gangbanger is participating in society more or better than they are, because maybe the drug dealer can afford a better car than them, and that's status, and that's more participation, even though they don't vote or donate to Congress or something. But they somehow have more pull, or that the blue-haired SJW has more influence because Democrats will at least give lip service to them, and the aesthetics are what's visible, and that's what matters. Whether
that's the thing. Like, when it's just lip service, it's fucking politically impotent. It's not changing anything. It's just people talking shit and doing nothing.
But it makes them feel good.
That's why so many
it works. It's
frustrated.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who just feel good about it.
And that was a big appeal for the QAnon movement, where suddenly all these people that were just sitting at home and bored every day felt like they were part of some basically they were part of like National Treasure or the Da Vinci Code or something like that, and they were solving these riddles and really fighting against these horrible shadowy cabals that were controlling the world. But they had all of that stuff in there too, where simultaneously Trump is the most powerful man on earth in their view. Like he's fighting off the deep state with the help of JFK Jr., who's not dead but really alive. But anyway, they're fighting against this cabal that eventually will fall. But this deep state, they really control everything. And I mean, eventually, once you got down to it, it's like a lot of these movements, and it was always their answer was the Jews are doing everything. It was their shadowy cabal was just, or their international globalists, or whatever catchphrase they would use. Eventually, it came out like so many of these fascist sort of movements.
Or just reactionary.
They're just reactionary. Yeah.
Right. Brings Marjorie Taylor Greene to mind with her Jewish space laser shit.
Oh my God.
Again, it's rhetoric
like,
that
okay.
makes her base feel good,
Yeah. Yeah.
even though she's not. There's no
Not tethered to
legislation.
reality.
There's no proposal to do something about the Jewish space lasers. Only
Not just talk about it a bunch.
just a reference so that people feel like they're participating in a movement against it or whatever. But yeah, the QAnon is what was like. Oh yeah, just how sad it is to think that those groups, those community whatever masses are like their political education just actually did come from Hollywood movies and nowhere else.
Yeah.
Which I can only imagine because I've encountered it enough where the way people talk about issues only comes from the tropes and cliches in movies and nowhere else in the way that campaigns are run or politics is done. In movies where politics happens or it's accomplished, something's done through politics or voting or whatever. That's the way they talk about it. Like that's their rhetoric, their arguments for like why you should vote for Biden or something, or harm reduction or whatever argument they use, or lesser evilism is coming from a Hollywood trope, not any real historical basis. And Chris Cutrone and other Marxists will say look, the left's role, our role, is always to historicize as much as possible, to actually not just ask the questions, but to base what we're talking about in something that it's real and something that actually happened, and not an idea of what happened or an interpretation that comes through the lens of a dramatization or a movie, which itself is a myth. It's a story. Not a place to actually get a real education. Even though we ourselves, but also, I mean, we make fun of Ben Shapiro or any other right winger commentator. They were paid millions of dollars to do that, to make or Tim Pool, the most uneducated man in America.
Oh my God.
That I'm going to make a reference to a movie. It's like that. What Biden's doing, it's like that Marvel movie.
Everything is a Marvel movie with him. Like I don't think he can make an analogy without invoking the MCU.
Yeah, it shocked me how actually uneducated that man is. He dropped
And yet he
out.
has.
Did you? I don't know if you were aware, because I don't know if it was the surfs that was running through it all, but he dropped out of high school after one quarter.
I didn't know he was a high school dropout.
Not only a high school dropout, he dropped out after the first quarter because he got all Fs because he wasn't doing any work, because he was too smart to do any homework or whatever, or it was boring, whatever. He's too cool for school, literally. That's how we would frame it. And not only that, he was too school to be homeschooled, to be self-educated. He didn't even self-educate himself. His parents were cool with getting him books through the mail and whatever, and he didn't do that either. He just went straight to the equivalent of Instagramming and streaming as a skater boy.
Yeah.
And that was his and being like a journalist by going out and observing.
I just don't
things.
get.
And he failed. He just failed upward.
But how did he ever get a job with Vice? Like that was his big break, was covering Occupy with Vice. Like, who looked at this kid and thought, wow, he's really got a unique perspective here?
Well, being hired isn't really the trick. It's keeping a job, and he never kept a job. He was always too cool to keep a job, because he is so unlikable and dumb. But there's enough of an audience that think and act just like him, and that I guess that's his
so.
audience. All those other too cool for school edgelords, I guess, who were bored because their teachers sucked or the schools were underfunded or they didn't have parents that instilled any discipline or encouraged them to actually, stick with something, or stick with book learning. But really, it's also the absence of any actual also practical. Like he didn't go into the trades or any real, again, no education, not even a trade education. Just Mr. I'm cool, and he just I guess he appeals to the narcissist in that audience. It's great. It's a circus, of course.
Yeah.
But it is scary that he has such an audience from just
It is.
being online as himself.
Yeah. But after being so wrong so many times, so publicly, with his prediction. But why?
He's right in how he's wrong. Or he's wrong, but he's cool while being wrong. And it's also just the acknowledgement. I don't know, when you're truly true ignorance is never being able, not even being smart enough or self-aware enough to acknowledge that you were wrong about something. Because you'll see a lot, like real time on his show, that he will twist whenever he's wrong as just being as him being right. He was right.
Yeah.
He was wrong.
Well, because that's his little waffling back and forth dance, is that he'll make every single prediction for and against any single thing happening, so that when he's wrong in the big picture, he can just be, well, I also said, well, maybe it won't happen, so I guess I was right in the long run.
And he's been doing that his whole life apparently.
Yeah.
And but it did shock me that like he wasn't even like a, just didn't go to college because he's too cool for college, because that is somewhat popular notion that you do any book learning after 18. But he didn't even have any after 8th grade. He just stopped, or he wasn't even doing it then. His entire worldview does in fact come from media. Which makes him a true
American.
True American and representation of the spectacle. He's the most American man in a. That's why I say he is the most uneducated man in America, but the most American, more American than us. Anyway, let's continue.
I won't
sidetracked enough.
Yeah. I would like
Sorry,
to
Brockton Pool.
No, that's fine. I should really cover his videos more. I don't think I have covered any yet, but I should.
I don't think it's worth it.
It's just. I mean, it's fun. It's
maybe. It's painful.
Yeah.
We need to kill the cringe, not feed it.
Not platform it.
Let's not feed that wolf.
Okay. All right. Well, here we go with. I think we're on to.
Fascist governments are condemned to lose wars because they're constitutionally incapable of objectively evaluating the force of the enemy. 9. For Fascism, there is no struggle for life, but rather, life is lived for struggle. Thus, pacifism is trafficking with the enemy. It is bad because life is permanent warfare. This, however, brings about an Armageddon complex. Since enemies have to be defeated, there must be a final battle, after which the movement will have control of the world. But such a final solution implies a further era of peace, a golden age, which contradicts the principle of permanent war. No fascist leader has ever succeeded in solving this predicament. 10.
I'm looking at the history of fascist movements. They do tend to disintegrate pretty quickly after.
But doesn't that describe Marxist movements too? When we talk of worker struggle, and that there will need to be not a final battle, but a big, a point where a breaking point.
Yeah, I guess some do talk about like the end of history and just a worker's paradise and stuff like that.
But when we have a stateless, moneyless society, that won't that also be the end of history? But or it's the end of politics, actually. No, the end of politics. That's the real key thing. There's no politics in Star Trek, because
true enough,
because everything's kind of good. The only politics
scarcity.
The only politics is fighting with other people who aren't in the polity, and or how to handle relations with other polities.
True.
That's the only politics that exists in Star Trek, even though there should be representations, but maybe that's the true utopianism, that there really is no internal politics when it comes to the Federation, because everything's just so, it just works.
It works, yeah.
Even though it's never explained, it's all kept ambiguous.
Yeah. I got the idea that it was just because of the replicator technology. So there's literally no more, unlimited power plus the ability to materialize anything means there's no more scarcity of anything. And it is kind of a utopian view because we have a way overabundance of things right now, and yet it's not shared equally.
Well, it's not
So,
true post scarcity, because the replicators are, do need power, and the power comes from a resource. So
yeah, but they basically have unlimited power in there. What is it, the dilithium crystals?
well, then why are they always
So-
running out of power, or the power is being shorted out?
Well, that's a good question. That's a
You
big
wouldn't-
plot
you wouldn't
hole
have drama
there.
otherwise. But one of the critiques or the observations of the satire of Lower Decks is, at least at the end of the first season, that the Federation is good at exploring and observing, but not maintaining things, which sort
Oh.
of interesting. But is it maintaining things within the Federation? Because that seems covered. But then there's all the things that are explored that aren't maintained, particularly when you think about the longer plots of Star Trek series, like the various neutral zones, or how the Maquis formed, in that you had an area of space that the Federation basically said, we're not going to maintain this because of treaty, and we made a deal that we weren't going to, and leave you colonists high and dry, to under like a different polity, which you obviously had no decision in. So we basically let go of your sovereignty, which is obviously many episodes were covering.
Interesting. Yeah.
It never truly resolved, except that it was subsumed under the Dominion War, and since you didn't have a series that comes after, well, I guess Picard technically does, so I guess I'd have to watch it to know if it was, but the plot of Picard doesn't seem to touch on it, at least I'm aware of. But what happens after the Dominion War? You obviously have the Kardashian government has completely changed, so I'm assuming things in that territory, were reorganized for the better, but we're not told or shown that. So
Interesting.
maybe
Did
it's
not
in
know
fanfic.
that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with Star Trek, is that they keep making shows that take place in the past and not after the events of
Not building
of the,
forward
of
into
the
it.
most show, because like, where do you go next? Well, obviously you can always fucking go next. I mean,
Yeah, it's infinite space, sure.
The ultimate, like, the end goal, if there is an end goal of Star Trek, is the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, united under one polity, basically.
Sure.
But that seems like an imperialist project, right? Which is one of those things mentioned, kind of winked at the Federation sometimes, that it feels like that it has these qualities of an imperialist project. But
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Exploring places, imposing your views and your rules
well, they
on
don't
everybody. you
impose,
find,
but
or-
they integrate
Yeah.
others into the
Okay.
polity. So
It's
like,
it's soft power,
yeah.
but sure.
And those
Yeah.
conflicts come from, like, say, the Klingons are like, oh, or we got to fight against. We have our own people going, integrating into the Federation, or or integrating outside of Klingon society as one solid thing, and because it's a multicultural polity, so all very liberal at the same time, right? So,
Yeah, that's true.
but
All right, Sorry, I think we should try and wrap up the last couple minutes here. So I'm just going to let it go through the next few points, and I think that should be I think he might have something at the end to kind of sum everything up, but that's the main point, main part of it.
So
Anyway.
Trissa, you got mozzarella sticks.
Did you really? Oh, you lucky.
Did I inspire you?
I did. Yes. I love cheese sticks.
They're so
And
good.
I've been hungry anyways, and just like, okay, that sounds good, and ordered some DoorDash.
Throw it not obviously more in person, but throw off anyone who does mozzarella sticks. Ask for like, do you have raspberry dipping sauce? Or like, I guess
Yeah.
maybe ranch, but obviously.
It's not quite as sweet usually, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never tried them
Yeah.
with raspberry sauce. I usually go straight for the marinara because
I'm gonna have to try that. I'm
Because
definitely
it's
gonna try it at some
Italian,
point.
because
Yeah.
it's an Italian food, but really it's fried cheese, so really anything could work
Yeah,
with
it can
it.
go. It's a pretty good base to jump off of. Yeah.
Yep. These ones are actually seasoned pretty good too.
Ooh, you don't usually see that, at least not around here. Mozzarella sticks are
Not
pretty
in
plain
frozen,
the way they do.
not in frozen mozzarella sticks from the frozen
Yeah.
aisle.
Yeah.
Those are tasteless to me.
Yeah.
Right. I love when they bother to put some herbs and stuff in breading. It's delicious.
Yeah. Makes a big difference. Kicks it up a notch. All right.
Bam.
Finishing up the last few minutes though. So I'm just gonna let it play until the end, and then we can have some closing thoughts.
Elitism is a typical aspect of any reactionary ideology, insofar as it is fundamentally aristocratic, and aristocratic and militaristic elitism cruelly implies contempt for the weak. Ur-fascism can only advocate a popular elitism. Every citizen belongs to the best people of the world. The members of the party are the best among the citizens. Every citizen can, or ought to, become a member of the party. But there cannot be patricians without plebeians. In fact, the leader, knowing that his power was not delegated to him democratically but was conquered by force, also knows that his force is based upon the weakness of the masses. They are so weak as to need and deserve a ruler. Since the group is hierarchically organized according to a military model, every subordinate leader despises his own underlings, and each of them despises his inferiors. This reinforces the sense of mass elitism. 11. In such a perspective, everybody is educated to become a hero. In every mythology, the hero is an exceptional being, but in Ur-fascist ideology, heroism is the normal. This cult of heroism is strictly linked with the cult of death. It is not by chance that a motto of the Phalangists was Viva la muerte, long live death.
Jesus.
In non-fascist societies, the lay public is told that death is unpleasant but must be faced with dignity. Believers are told that it is the painful way to reach a supernatural happiness. By contrast, the Ur-fascist hero craves heroic death, advertised as the best reward for a heroic life. The Ur-fascist hero is impatient to die. In his impatience, he more frequently sends other people to death. 12. Since both permanent war and heroism are difficult games to play, the Ur-fascist transfers his will to power to sexual matters. This is the origin of machismo, which implies both disdain for women and intolerance and condemnation of non-standard sexual habits, from chastity to homosexuality. Since even sex is a difficult game to play, the Ur-fascist hero tends to play with weapons. Doing so becomes an ersatz phallic exercise. 13. Ur-fascism is based on a selective populism. A qualitative populism, one might say. In a democracy, the citizens have individual rights, but the citizens in their entirety have a political impact only from a quantitative point of view. One follows the decisions of the majority. For Ur-fascism, however, individuals as individuals have no rights, and the people is conceived as a quality, a monolithic entity expressing the common will. Since no large quality of human beings can have a common will, the leader pretends to be their interpreter. Having lost their power of delegation, citizens do not act. They are only called on to play the role of the people. Thus the people is only a theatrical fiction. To have a good instance of qualitative populism, we no longer need the Piazza Venezia in Rome, or the Nuremberg Stadium. There is in our future a TV or internet populism, in which the emotional response of a selected group of citizens can be presented and accepted as the voice of the people. Because of its qualitative populism, Ur-fascism must be against rotten parliamentary governments. One of the first sentences uttered by Mussolini in the Italian parliament was, "I could have transformed this deaf and gloomy place into a bivouac for my maniples." Maniples being a subdivision of the traditional Roman legion. As a matter of fact, he immediately found better housing for his maniples, but a little later he liquidated the parliament. Wherever a politician casts doubt on the legitimacy of a parliament because it no longer represents the voice of the people, we can smell Ur-fascism. 14. Ur-fascism speaks Newspeak. Newspeak was invented by Orwell in 1984 as the official language of INSOC, English socialism. But elements of Ur-fascism are common to different forms of dictatorship. All the Nazi and fascist schoolbooks made use of an impoverished vocabulary and an elementary syntax, in order to limit the instruments for complex and critical reasoning. We must be ready to identify other kinds of Newspeak, even if they take the apparently innocent form of a popular talk show. On the morning of July 27, 1943, I was told that, according to radio reports, Fascism has collapsed, and Mussolini has been arrested. When my mother sent me out to buy the newspaper, I saw that the papers at the nearest newsstand had different titles. Moreover, after seeing the headlines, I realized that each newspaper said different things. I bought one of them blindly and read a message on the first page signed by 5 or 6 political parties, among them the Democracia Cristiana, the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, the Partito de Acción, and the Liberal Party. Until then, I had believed that there was a single party in every country, and that in Italy it was the Partito Nazionale Fascista. Now I was discovering that in my country several parties could exist at the same time. Since I was a clever boy, I immediately realized that so many parties could not have been born overnight, and they must have existed for some time as clandestine organizations. The message on the front celebrated the end of the dictatorship and the return of freedom of speech, of press, of political association. These words, freedom, dictatorship, liberty, I now read them for the first time in my life. I was reborn as a free Western man by virtue of these new words. We must keep alert, so that the sense of these words will not be forgotten again. Fascism is still around us, sometimes in plain clothes. It would be so much easier for us if there appeared on the world scene somebody saying, "I want to reopen Auschwitz! I want the black shirts to parade again in the Italian squares!" But life is not that simple. Fascism can come back under the most innocent of disguises. Our duty is to uncover it and point our finger at any of its new instances, every day, in every part of the world. Franklin Roosevelt's words of November 4th, 1938, are worth recalling. "I venture to challenging statement that if American democracy ceases to move forward as a living force, seeking day and night by peaceful means to better the lot of our citizens, fascism will grow and strengthen our land." Freedom and liberation are an unending task. Let me finish with a poem by Franco Fortini. On the bridge's parapet, the heads of the hanged, in the flowing rivulet, the spittle of the hanged. On the cobbles of the marketplaces, the fingernails of those lined up and shot. On the dry grass in the open spaces, the broken teeth of those lined up and shot. Biting the air, biting the stones, our flesh is no longer human. Biting the air, biting the stones, our hearts are no longer human. But we have read into the eyes of the dead, and shall bring freedom on the earth. But clenched tight in the fists of the dead lies the justice to be served.
This has been a production.
And there we have it.
Trish, you want to go first?
Still chewing, go for it.
Okay. So I want to circle around, oddly enough, to Tim Pool. Like I mentioned his 8th grade education level because he's not the only one who operates at an 8th grade education level. Majority of media, whether it be TV, print, or whatever, or movies, also operates at an 8th grade level. The justification is that this is the average reading level of Americans. Even though majority have graduated high
Through high school, yeah.
college, even college majority, probably 50% or more.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I don't know if that stat is still relevant or accurate at all, but I first kind of encountered being conscious of the 8th grade reading level reading Time magazine. And as a teen, but also mostly as a teen, but also going forward, I think for a bit of time, I got Time magazine or something. I don't know how I was reading it, but I was. Or no, maybe it was usually in my dentist's waiting room or doctor's waiting room. And and I would read it, or I would actually read it cover to cover, and I was just like, over time, just realized I wasn't learning anything. Like I just wasn't getting any real knowledge from this. And being conscious, because my education was ongoing, that I think it was just a difference that my vocabulary or other things I was reading was at a higher and higher reading level. And that this 8th grade.
Yeah.
And that's the case with all media that isn't, a book for college students or a book by or something of that nature.
Everything from mass markets.
Or left tube is working at a much higher grade level, I believe, since we're working off of sources of things that aren't or a higher grade level.
For sure.
12th grade or more. And so it's like it makes us does it make us elitist that we work at this level above 8th grade? Or that we would demand that all more media operate at a higher than 8th grade level so that those that consume it in a mass media set fashion actually grow or are more educated than 8th grade level, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
gradual. Um, I think that comes to mind, and it reminds me. So the other half of my thought is from a lecture on how to write books of novels from a novelist, how to write sci-fi, fantasy, and he would, and doing world building, he gave the advice that when you describe something, you should write in about something in concrete terms, in the area of concrete, instead of, don't talk of abstract concepts, or if you are going to talk about an idea or a concept, you need to ground it with some concrete language,
Mm-hmm.
say like they did something quickly. But the best way of doing that is, or rather, also, he said, like, but do you want to explain a concept, make it concrete, but do so with the least amount of words possible.
Hmm.
So it's like to say, like, he used the example of like the character hurried quickly, or he did something like that implied that they were doing something fast, quickly. I'm like, well, you don't have to use the word quickly, or you could combine it by using a more higher than 8th grade level term, word, to replace. You can use less words if you have a higher vocabulary. That's kind of what having, funny and intellectual words is all about. Using one word
Instead of a
whole
bunch, yeah.
sentences, or talking for an hour like Tim Pool does, where he has to talk and
Oh
talk and talk, or people on the View, they could, if they
man,
could, you can be concise. Now, of course, left tubers famously, when we write our essays, not concise at all either.
not at all.
But maybe they need to work on their vocabulary,
Sure.
or
Right.
because of people's pre-existing 8th grade level, you have to explain the words you're going to be using to work people up to being at a 12th
Yeah.
grade level. Then it needs to assume at a certain point that your audience is at a 12th grade comprehension level, and then you can drop the verbosity or whatever, and then you can be concise. But that's it's a skill that he was pointing out, to write using less words, to
Mm-hmm.
make abstract ideas more concrete, when talking about what people are doing, your characters, or when you're world building.
Yeah.
That was so elitist of you to use the word verbosity.
Yeah.
It was on purpose.
Jokes.
I don't even know if I
Jokes.
was
No, I-
using it accurately, or if it was the right word.
No, you definitely were. No, no.
you did.
Okay.
Verbosity, yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, I really can't stand when people find being educated to be elitist. Okay, I grew
Yeah.
up poor as shit, but I opened books and I read. It didn't matter if it was Encyclopedia Britannica or Stephen King books. I bothered to fucking read. So, as an elementary school student, I was, able to understand stuff at a collegiate level where I could skip school and go to my aunt's college courses with her and understand what the fuck they were talking about. And it had nothing to do with elitism. It had to do with I bothered to read. Okay, there's nothing elitist about wanting to know things. The elitism comes in with education being behind a fucking paywall. And as a commie, a very proud, diehard fucking commie, I think that education, seeing how it's necessary for survival and even for basic communication, should not be behind a paywall. This is something that should be accessible to everyone. But even in our current fucked financial system, if you can't afford to go to college, the fucking library is free. It's
Yeah.
free. You can go there and learn.
No, and, YouTube is free too. I mean, that's yeah. You both have hit on reasons that I do what I do. Is one, I think education shouldn't just be something that we stop at after we're out of school. Education should be a lifelong thing. Elitist about that.
No.
And two, I don't ever shy away from a text because it's overly complex. Although I don't know that I've covered necessarily any, high level stuff yet. But we've been mostly doing introductory stuff.
When are we doing the critique of the
last year?
Gotham program?
It's on the list. Don't worry.
Because I'm curious to actually read that one, since that's the one where he actually talks like political strategy.
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely do want to cover more Marx because I've only done Communist Manifesto of his so far.
Have you noticed how my black T-shirt with your desktop background makes it look like I'm wearing a commie shirt?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it looks like we're both part of Black Bloc there, and Trisha, I'd have to rearrange you to be a part of the group. But
Well, at first I thought the flag, the hammer and sickle, was like in Trisha's box
oh
instead
yeah,
of in their background. But
not quite.
Sadly, I don't have a hammer and sickle flag, but that's definitely something I'm gonna
Just
have
one of
to
those.
acquire at some point. But yeah, it totally looks
when
like it's on your sheet at first. When I came in, I thought it was, and then I'm like, wait a minute, no, that's the background.
when I if I ever have a when I have a house, I fly a flag on it. I kind of have an ongoing debate of what kind of flag I should put out. And my general idea is that there's not an actual political ideology flag, which would make me more of a target, but maybe something like well, the UN flag would do the same thing. But there's a flag where it's a blue field with 7 white circles,
Mm.
and the sort of like the Olympic rings, but just all the same color, and they're
Mm.
arranged in a more geometrically pleasing pattern to represent the 7 continents. And so it's the kind of
Oh,
world, not an internationalist flag, but to me it would represent an internationalist sentiment, that it's the world
oh,
flag. But otherwise the UN kind of fits that. So maybe I'll go
that's
with
kind of
that. But
cool.
maybe the UN with some extra. I would modify it so that it's like I'm coming at it as a communist. But
This is-
Yeah.
I'm just looking at it right now. The international flag of planet Earth. I'll bring it up on screen once my stupid thing loads.
The internal voice in my brain is playing "We Are the World."
We are.
Right?
So here we go. This is what it looks like.
yeah, that's it.
Cool.
It's the flower
Is
of
That's a
that
pretty.
from
life.
That's
a
a pretty design.
is that from a game, or is that a
Just says
nast?
flagofplanetearth.com.
Yeah,
So
okay. It's not an
I don't know what
astronaut,
this.
so
Yeah, I would doubt it's a real astronaut, but maybe it is. I don't know.
yeah. There's the thing. But if it
Yeah.
is being used on the ISS, then that would be, that does make it a symbol of international cooperation, internationalism.
Cool.
So,
Yeah,
because
it's a pretty flag.
it's not the UN flag being used on the ISS, right? So
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't think so. Yeah, I think that's a good
Pretty
choice.
cool. I dig that. I'm gonna have to get me one of those to fly on the RV. Shit.
either that or I get a Federation flag.
Star Trek Federation.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
there's a guy in my neighborhood who will put out a different flag every month. Sometimes it's Blackbeard's flag, um, the Ukrainian flag. He'll have the Union Army's battle flag during the Civil War. Um, but it will be weird. He's been putting up yeah, Federation flag. Uh, it's too much like the UN's flag.
Yeah, it
Too
is. It is
similar.
very
It's
UN like.
that just shows the politics of the show, really. But
Mm,
Well, it was very communist leaning.
yeah, definitely.
Um,
Post scarcity, luxury,
well,
space communism.
you can easily yeah, the jokes about like right wingers. When did Star Trek get woke? And
Yeah.
there's the latest I saw from the ship posting group was Data going like, "I will let my offspring decide its own gender when it's
Oh
ready."
yes.
But there's just as many episodes that kind of represent a reactionary politics at the same time.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you remember the hits, but you forget the misses. But it's mostly because um, Braga, who was the showrunner for most of the '90s, was
Hmm.
a reactionary, and so he didn't believe
Ah.
in the progressive message of the show. And it shows in a lot of Voyager, and only Deep Space Nine is loved because he didn't have a strong hand in that, and he was opposed to most of what they were doing. But he was in total control for most of Enterprise until the last season, and that's why the last season was better, because Braga was finally out. But he was a guy doing tons of sexist, disgusting things. Many have talked. There's a few Trekkie podcasts or whatever who talked about.
Oop, cutting out there a bit, Dan.
This in length. No, I was mentioning Renegade. He's a Trekkie who talks at length about the politics.
Oh yeah, I like him
in Star Trek. Great anarchist guy. I use a clip of him where he goes like when he was explaining to look, liberal, you can't just go you have to go that's an actual quote from Karl Marx.
That's pretty good.
I don't know if either of you follow him, but Will Wynn, the Star Trek communist.
Oh yeah, I like him.
Yeah, he's awesome. We've had him on for We Are Many.
Yeah, that was a good episode.
Great conversation. I look forward to having him back. But yeah, he gets really in depth into the political analysis of the show, and showing people see what the fuck we could have if everybody just worked together and gave a shit about each other. It's beautiful.
We have 2 years till the Bell riots. Will we?
That's true.
Will we be ready?
Crossing the fingers.
But we can't just wait till it to happen. That's
no.
not how it happened. Otherwise, last year, it's this year that Soylent Green takes place.
Oh, wow.
Think about that. I actually watched Soylent Green when I was in college. I got it in the library.
It's not that bad as sci-fi flicks go.
It's funny how the main twist of the movie is literally the last line.
Yeah.
And there's all this other shit. It's a murder mystery actually, and there's so much more in the movie that isn't referenced or memed at all. It's just the twist that Soylent Green is cannibalism. But why is Soylent Green important? Or why is this what everyone's eating? The narrative of the movie is a little bit of overpopulation, which was very popular in the 70s, but also an overpollution. This is what the world would be like if we don't have the Clean Air Act, and what have you.
True.
So,
kind of an eco-fascist.
Yeah, because it's a world where the world is poisoned and you can't grow anything anymore. There's really no food supply. And it's said that it's kelp farms that Soylent Green comes from, but the oceans died in
dead. Yeah,
it died in 2019. So and that's where the realization of what the fuck, something terrible.
Where's it coming from then?
And it's only when he discovers the factory where the state has a suicide program. It's just voluntary suicide. You have a suicide center that you go to commit suicide.
It's like the Futurama suicide box.
Exactly. It comes from that, really. But instead of a box, it's a theater or something. And he follows his older friend who, when at this realization, loses the will to live. And he follows his body through the machines and the transportation to the factory where Soylent Green, and it's his body goes in, Soylent Green comes out, and then he's kind of rushes back, and then the G-men come to get him, and he's being carted off, yelling, screaming, "It's people, we're all cattle. They're raising us like cattle next," because they're doing it with dead bodies now. But it's also there's the whole lack of birth control and too many people.
Sure.
It's the opening of the movie is saying New York City has a population of 20 million.
Yeah. Was that the movie where they had the scene where there was these giant industrial machines that would come by and just kind of scoop homeless people off the street and dump them into Holding tank,
yes
basically?
and no. So the they had modified garbage trucks
Yeah.
using a claw, but and dumping people in the back, but it was for riot control. So
Supposedly riot control.
you pretty much had daily riots. And by the way, um, Clint Eastwood, yeah. Um, his character, he's a detective, he's a cop.
No, it was Heston, Charlton
Heston,
Heston.
sorry, Charlton Heston.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Get those two
Yeah.
confused all the time.
I mean, they're basically the same man. So, yeah.
As far as guns are concerned, right?
Yeah,
Clint
pretty much.
Eastwood he's a main character like many. It's a murder mystery. He's a cop. He's investigating a murder of a rich guy, and I think it was he was killed by the other in the cabal because he was going to go public with how things are happening, or something. But yeah, there's riots, especially because they're running out of food. Everyone likes Soylent Green, but they don't have enough of it because they're not actively killing people to make it. And so there's a riot, and they use the dump trucks, and there's like a harrowing scene where they're using the dump trucks. It's sort of like The Expanse, where you have the main character like do riot control at the same time in the first season. It reminds me of
good
that.
show too.
Sci-fi is always reusing things.
For sure. All right.
So,
I
I'm
think we should probably.
Sorry, before we wrap up, I just want to say I'm much more comfortable with
Sure.
the Star Trek manner of the food replicators
Yeah.
really recycling your in order to
Yeah,
make new food from. Like, just
it's a lot more palatable.
Yeah.
I like how in Lower Decks it shows them eating more. Well, actually shows them eating for once, and showing the diversity of things that they're eating. So like usually every other episode they'll have them in the mess hall, and someone will be eating a taco salad.
Taco salad, huh?
Yeah, or tacos, or just Mexican, or the doctor, the chief doctor is eating nachos, but she's a cat and she gets knocked into the nachos and she's just super pissed. Like, oh, do you know how hard it is to get cheese out of my fur in a sonic shower? It's really good. Though
Sounds good.
there's not a lot of reaction channels that were doing it, and one of them were this couple of Trekkies who were just really humorless. They didn't find anything in the show funny.
Oh,
Really rarely. They were just super critical because they just couldn't turn off like the whole like this has to be realistic. This has to I guess they never watch cartoons or something.
Yeah,
it's
right.
like they were treating it like they were watching a real Star Trek show. And it's like, this is a cartoon. You're not supposed to it's supposed to be silly. It's silly. Don't take it so seriously. God. Anyway,
which service is that on? Which streaming service is Lower Decks on?
it's CBS's.
Oh, just on
streaming,
CBS?
which is all
Okay.
access, but I watch it through was it Kiss Cartoon.
Kiss Cartoon. Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say maybe we should take a look at the first episode or whatever a good episode was, and maybe do a show on that.
It's
sometime.
not the first one. No,
Okay.
the first two are the
Kind of duds.
only because there's a character like the character of Mariner she's more asshole in the first two episodes, and then because it's more like the two main characters are evening each other out. One's really tight and rule based, and the other's the rebel and practically an anarchist. But not doesn't ideology doesn't really exist. Well, I mean it does, but no, I guess no, I guess we could start. We'd start with the third one, I guess, or we
Sure.
start with the first one and we just talk about all the
crap.
things to comment on. Really, it's all things abound there. I love Lower Decks, but only because I'm watching cartoons and I can access it, and otherwise I'm not watching Picard and Discovery. But yeah, but I didn't really like how Discovery was like, oh yeah, it's a whole season with the mirror universe, and I'm like, why are they reusing that? That's the thing you make fun of, and that's what Lower Decks is for, making fun of the mirror universe.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I'll definitely try to check it out and see see what I think of it too. And maybe maybe we'll do a
This is-
show
this is-
sometime.
This is funny. This is one last joke. The cat doctor thinks she's in a parallel dimension because like it's the same crew, but everyone's gender flipped.
Ah.
But it turns out she just got on the wrong ship.
Oh.
It was like something's really wrong. Because like there's an episode where it's like I'm going around and no one seems to know me. It's like, wait, is this Cerritos? No, this is the Shenandoah. Oh, okay. Because the ships, it's the same class. They look the same.
Very similar. Yeah. Gotcha. That's funny. Yeah, I'll check it out. All right. Anything you guys want to plug or shout out before we wrap it up for the night? Either of you can go first.
Trisha first, since I've been talking.
Not that I can think of. It's all good.
Okay.
You plug
Are you gonna do
the Green Party. Just got a shout out. We need good people to be part of an actual grassroots party.
Yeah.
We can do community projects. We can act as a political union. Because otherwise you're left joining nonprofits and being part of that complex. We are not part of that. So, I mean, if it's at least join something that isn't part of the nonprofit industrial complex, and the Greens are never been part of it, and we never will be. And
Never will
so, at least as far as political actors go. So, that's why I'm in it.
Yeah. I've been trying to get in contact with my local Green Party, but I don't know if the Twin Cities one is defunct or whatever, because I just got an auto reply and it mentioned the 2018 elections. So it's not a good sign.
Well, I would point you towards the SA chapter. Isn't there a socialist alternative chapter?
There is, yeah.
Because it was in Minneapolis that I was ranting about how there was a Green Party candidate that was not a socialist, and they actually did vote split or side against with the Democrat against the socialist alternative candidate. Or that happened a few years ago. It was last election that a DSA candidate, not Cam Gordon now, but it was in a different race, council race, that a Green who was not, I guess like Cam Gordon isn't a socialist either, but
yeah, he was just kind of a regular progressive sort of guy.
Sure, but right. So you have the Minneapolis Greens have more of that character than eco-socialists. So you might be better off going to socialist alternative.
Okay.
If they're more active.
Yeah, they were tabling. They were tabling at a recent Planned Parenthood rally. So it seems like they're active at least. So yeah, maybe I'll check that out.
Or you restart the Green chapter as an eco-socialist.
Yeah.
And then you do stuff with SA.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's
do a slate that way.
The way to do it. All right. Trisha, are you guys doing your current event stream this week?
Yeah, and I can't remember I need to call Rob because there's some stuff we were discussing yesterday. We might end up just pre-recording it on Thursday to regular time on Friday, or just do it earlier in the day on Friday because of a whole bunch of juggling going on.
Stuff for sure.
Anyway, yeah, we will have that. For the Panther classes, those are restarting at week 1 next week. So
very cool.
Keep your eyes peeled for that one.
Yeah, I listened into one, and yeah, that was a really good class. A lot of really great info, and yeah, just all around great.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Glad to be able to bring that education to people and make that public. That's a big part of why we started this too, is because against the elitism of education being behind a paywall, if how about we actually discuss some real political line here and actually have these conversations and read through these materials, because it is important. Theory matters.
Sure does.
Theory without praxis is basically impotent, and praxis without theory is blind. So gotta have both.
Right on.
Okay, I want to, after looking at the page for the international flag, it is a proposed flag to replace maybe the
Ah.
UN flag. So the mock-up with the astronaut is a mock-up, and they have another one where it's like a UN style panel table with that flag. So it's like it's a proposal for an internationalist flag that
Nice.
isn't using the color red. It's using blue, which is okay with me.
Sure. Yeah, a
If
big
anything,
blue
if you can have it work with a
dot.
red flag, and then you can have some nice contemporary,
There we
complementary
go.
colors. You just
Yeah.
need a yellow flag that doesn't make people think of libertarians.
Yeah. Good luck with that. All right, so before we go, the one thing that I want to mention was this last Friday we had our first ever leftist karaoke night. Putting the link to that recording in the chat right now. And it was a big success. We had 6-8 people show up, and everyone sang at least a few songs. Unfortunately, Trisha was not able to get there until the very end, but managed to sing nonetheless. And it was a really great way to have a finale. And so I'm planning on doing it again in August. Probably going to be the last Friday in August, but I will be putting out the official announcement soon on that. So I look forward to that, and hopefully you'll see even more people there this time, like yourself, Dan. What do you think?
I'm not. I did karaoke once, but I'm not a fan.
Okay, that's fine. It's not for everybody, but maybe at least in the audience, cheering us on and whatnot.
I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable singing in public that much.
I-
I know
I'm-
karaoke is all about not doing that.
Yeah.
But I'm a saxophonist first and foremost.
Well, hey, if you want to do a saxophone karaoke, then that'd be totally cool.
I'll play on stream, sure.
Nice, very cool.
Oh, yes. That'd be dope.
That'd be awesome.
I love the saxophone. I played
Yeah.
tenor sax in junior high and high school.
I did too. I was also a tenor saxophonist. I was the only one in my my band.
My problem
Same.
is I
There was a few
can't.
other altos. but-
My problem is I can't seem to get the right combination of reed and mouthpiece pad because
Ah.
my teeth just can't handle biting the mouthpiece. And
Ah,
but with the pad I can't make a good seal on the mouthpiece, so it's really affecting the sound poorly. And
that's unfortunate.
I have to get new pads. I guess a better pad, and
Yeah.
the I got a new fiber cell reed, but like it's made to be like wood too much, and so it's like this tastes like wood. It's not wood, but I'm like, this is everything I don't like about it's all the things I don't like about wood reeds, and I just want a replacement for my fiber cell, and because I've been using one that was for like a bari saxophone, and I want one that I wanted to try one that fits my mouthpiece better, and thinking that would fix my sound or spit problem, but
Yeah.
seemed to make it worse because now it's like I have to,
Ew.
make it wet, even though it's fiber cell. But it's, fiber cell is supposed to be like a plastic reed. It's like
Right.
plastic.
Sure.
And that's the one I kind of like using. And I got a replacement, and it's just not working. So I guess I need to order
Oh, super.
new things, which I don't like doing. But
Well, geez, I had no idea this whole.
so complicated,
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know you played saxophone. Still, that's cool.
Yeah, I try to do it once a month.
Nice.
The obvious long-term goal is to start a marching punk band and play
Nice.
Awesome.
Hell
Rage
yeah.
Against the Machine tracks songs.
Yeah.
But,
Hell yeah.
there's one other guy in the area I know who wanted to start one. He does trombone. But the thing was, everyone else who was kind of interested is in different parts of the region. Like they were all in different cities. So it's like having a way, and we're all like the same kind of carless, poor anarchists. So where are we going to find a space to practice?
Yeah,
Are we gonna use
scheduling
someone's
the
garage.
practice.
How are we going to
Yeah.
schedule it? It wasn't coming together. I mean, he said he wouldn't organize it. I would say I would if it was certain there would be 5 of us doing it. Anyway, it's a kernel. It's in the background, but it's like there's a lot of other things to do first. Guys, let's secure some housing, and then maybe we'll have a space to practice.
Cool.
Right. Hell yeah.
All right. Well, with that, I think I will say thank you both again for joining tonight, and can't wait till we get back together and cover some more cool stuff. So, have a good night, everybody, and I will see you next time.
Thank you for having me, Zach. Good seeing you again,
Ah,
Dan.
oh,
This has
good.
been
Bye bye.
awesome.
I'll see the stream again Sunday
Yep,
with
back
videos.
Sunday
All right.
doing
Yeah.
reactions. All right, see ya. All right, so we do have at least one person on Twitch still watching, so I will do a raid. Let's see. It looks like let's raid into Ali's channel. So we will start the raid pretty soon. Hang on for that, and we will start it as soon as I can type it in. All right, have a good night, everybody.